The rain fell hard against the metal roofs of the mining town. The sound of it echoed across the empty streets, each drop striking with sharp rhythm. In the distance, thunder rolled over the dark mountains, and the winds carried dust from the mines. Most people had already locked their doors and shut their lights. The storm was too strong for travel, too fierce for wandering. Inside a small workshop at the edge of town, a single lamp flickered. Ethan sat hunched over a broken piece of mining equipment, his hands covered in oil and metal dust. He was young, though his eyes carried the tiredness of someone who had lived through too many long nights. The world he called home was poor, forgotten by the larger empires. Few ships ever came here. Few strangers ever passed through. That was why the sound startled him. The heavy door of the workshop opened with a slow groan, and the storm rushed in behind it. Standing in the doorway was a figure wrapped in dark armor. Sparks of strange blue light pulsed across the plates, broken and unstable. She leaned against the frame, her movements heavy, her breath uneven. Ethan rose quickly, his heart racing. He had seen broken miners come in, wounded travelers, even smugglers with cheap blasters. But this was different. Her armor was not like anything he had ever seen. It was elegant and deadly, glowing with power even in its damaged state. She stepped forward, and her boots left wet marks on the floor. Her voice was calm but sharp. "Can you repair it?" Ethan blinked. "The armor?" "Yes." Her eyes, hidden behind a cracked visor, glimmered faintly. "It must be repaired." He hesitated. The storm roared outside, rattling the walls. Something about her presence unsettled him, yet drew him closer. He nodded slowly. "I can try," he said. She removed her helmet, revealing a face both fierce and beautiful. Her dark hair clung to her skin from the rain. A thin scar traced across her cheek, a mark of battles long past. Her eyes were deep, sharp with command, but there was also exhaustion in them. She carried herself like someone who had stood against armies, yet now she looked as though she might collapse at any moment. Ethan cleared a space on the table and gestured for her to sit. She did, silent and watchful, as if she expected danger even here in his forgotten town. He lifted a piece of her armor and felt the strange hum of energy within it. The material shifted faintly, as though alive. "This is not from any world I know," Ethan said quietly. "You do not need to know," she replied. "You only need to fix it." Her words were sharp, but not unkind. They carried weight, as though she was used to being obeyed without question. Ethan did not argue. He gathered his tools and studied the armor piece under the lamp. The edges were burned, as if struck by weapons beyond his understanding. Strange circuits pulsed with light, and he realized his tools were far too simple for technology like this. Yet something inside him refused to turn her away. "You are lucky you found me during the storm," Ethan said softly. "No one else would have their shop open." She tilted her head. "Lucky?" "Yes." He forced a small smile. "Or maybe unlucky. I do not know yet." For a moment silence filled the room. The storm howled outside, shaking the windows, but inside the workshop there was only the sound of Ethan's tools and her steady breathing. He worked carefully, repairing each broken piece with patience. As he worked, he noticed the scars on her body where the armor had cracked. They were not the scars of a miner or a smuggler. These were the scars of someone who had survived countless battles. He wanted to ask who she was, where she came from, but something in her gaze stopped him. Still, curiosity burned inside him. "You fought a war," he said quietly. Her eyes locked on his. For a long moment she did not answer. Then she spoke, her voice softer. "Many wars." Ethan nodded and returned to his work. He felt her watching him, studying him as though she was waiting to see if he would break under the weight of her presence. Yet he did not. He focused only on the armor. Hours passed. The storm showed no sign of ending. Ethan continued repairing, his hands steady, his mind filled with questions he dared not ask. Who was she? What kind of soldier wore armor like this? And why had she come here, to a forgotten mining world, in the middle of a storm. Finally, he looked up from his work. "You should rest," he said. "It will take time to repair all of this." Her eyes softened for the first time. She leaned back slightly, though her posture remained strong. "Rest is rare for me," she whispered. Ethan set down his tools and met her gaze. For a brief moment, the storm outside seemed distant, and the small workshop became its own world. Two strangers, bound by chance, sitting together as fate quietly shifted around them. He did not know who she truly was. He did not know that the woman before him ruled entire worlds. All he knew was that he had chosen to help her. And that choice would change his life forever. The storm outside did not fade. It only grew stronger, shaking the walls of the workshop with every gust of wind. But inside, the light of Ethan's small lamp glowed warm against the shadows. The stranger sat silent, her armor scattered across the table in broken pieces. Each part hummed faintly, alive with strange energy, waiting for his hands to restore it. Ethan studied the largest plate, bent and fractured. The glowing circuits beneath the surface looked more like veins than wires. He traced them carefully, his tools trembling in his grip. He had never worked with anything like this. One wrong move could destroy the entire system. The woman's voice broke the silence. "Do you fear it?" Ethan looked up. Her eyes glimmered in the dim light, sharp and unreadable. "I do not fear machines," he said. "But this is more than a machine." She leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Then why do you help?" Ethan paused, thinking carefully. The storm roared again, rattling the windows. Finally, he answered. "Because you asked?" Her gaze lingered on him. He expected her to laugh, or to dismiss his words. But she did not. Instead, she leaned back in silence, as if his answer carried more weight than he knew. He returned to his work, the sound of tools filling the room once more. Sparks flickered as he welded a broken edge, sealing the fracture with steady precision. Sweat formed on his forehead, but his hands remained calm. Hours passed. Piece by piece, the armor began to take shape again. Ethan worked with focus, every movement careful, every choice deliberate. The woman watched him without interruption, her eyes tracing his hands as if she could see into his thoughts. At last, he set down one of the plates, restored to near perfection. He exhaled slowly. "This piece will hold," he said. She touched the plate, her fingers brushing against the surface. The blue light glowed brighter beneath her touch, almost like it recognized her. For a moment, Ethan saw her lips part in something close to relief. "You are skilled," she said softly. "Not skilled enough," he replied. "I only patch what I can. Whoever made this, they built it with knowledge far beyond mine." Her eyes narrowed, but not in anger. Instead, she seemed to study him, as though she was trying to measure the shape of his soul. "You fix what others would fear to touch," she said. "That is more rare than you think." Ethan avoided her gaze and reached for another piece of armor. His hands worked, but his mind was restless. He wanted to ask again who she was, what kind of war left scars like hers, but he held back. He sensed that her answers would change everything, and he was not ready for that truth. Instead, he said quietly, "Whoever hurt you, they must be powerful." The silence after his words was heavy. She did not look away, but her eyes darkened. "They were many," she said at last. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "And they will come again." Ethan froze, the weight of her words sinking into him. He glanced at the broken armor, then at her calm, steady face. Whoever this woman was, she was not running from a single battle. She was running from entire armies. Still, he returned to his work. His tools sparked, his hands steady, his heart racing. He had lived his life fixing broken things. Machines. Tools. Scraps left behind by miners who could not afford replacements. But this was different. This was not just repair. This was survival. As the night stretched on, the storm finally began to weaken. The rain softened. The thunder rolled farther into the distance. Yet inside the workshop, the tension grew heavier. Ethan finished repairing another plate and set it down. He felt her watching him, her presence filling the small room like a storm of its own. At last he asked the question that burned in his chest. "Why trust me?" Her lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Because you did not turn me away." Her words struck him deeper than he expected. He nodded slowly, unsure what to say. He returned to his work, though his thoughts were no longer steady. Something had changed between them. A bond, fragile but real, had begun to form. By dawn, the first light crept through the cracks in the window. Ethan's hands were sore, his eyes heavy, but half of her armor was restored. The broken pieces now gleamed with strength again, alive with a steady hum. She stood, lifting one of the plates with ease. Her posture shifted, strong and regal, as if the armor awakened her true nature. Ethan felt it then. She was no ordinary warrior. She carried power, presence, and command that no miner or smuggler could ever match. But he did not know the truth yet. He only knew that she was unlike anyone he had ever met. As she placed the repaired armor back against her body, she looked at him one last time before the sun broke over the horizon. "You will finish the rest," she said. It was not a question. Ethan nodded. "Yes, I will." And as the light filled the workshop, Ethan realized that his small world had already begun to change. The morning light filled the workshop, soft and golden after a long night of storm and thunder. Outside, the mining town stirred awake, but inside, the air remained heavy with silence. The stranger's armor lay spread across the table, some pieces now restored, glowing with calm blue light. Ethan wiped the sweat and dust from his face. His hands ached, yet his focus never faded. Every strike of his tool carried weight. Every repaired circuit felt like opening a door into another world. He leaned closer to the chest piece of her armor, the most damaged part. Cracks spread across its surface like scars on stone, and inside it pulsed with faint light, steady like a heartbeat. As he touched one of the inner panels, the armor reacted. A sharp flash of light filled the room, and a screen of shifting symbols burst into the air above the plate. Ethan flinched back, nearly dropping his tool. The woman stood instantly, her hand near her weapon. Her voice was sharp, commanding. "What did you do?" Nothing," Ethan said quickly. "It activated on its own." The floating images stabilized, showing visions too clear to be random patterns. Ethan's eyes widened as he saw vast fleets of ships crossing black space. Their designs were sleek, deadly, lined with banners of silver and crimson. Worlds burned beneath those fleets. Cities turned to ash. Armies of thousands fell to their knees before a single figure. And then he saw her. The stranger. Standing tall at the front of those armies. Her face illuminated by the fire of conquest, her armor glowing in triumph. Soldiers knelt before her, millions of voices raised in allegiance. Ethan's breath caught in his chest. His voice was low, almost broken. You command them." She reached forward, and with a swift motion, shut down the projection. The light vanished, leaving the workshop dim once again. Her eyes locked on him, sharp and unyielding. "You were not meant to see that," she said. Ethan's hands shook, but he forced himself to speak. "Then what are you? A warlord? A queen?" She did not answer at once. Her silence was louder than any storm. Finally she spoke, her words measured. "I am someone hunted. That is all you need to know." Ethan clenched his jaw. Part of him wanted to press, to demand the truth, but another part whispered caution. She had trusted him enough to stay here. If he pushed too hard, that fragile trust might shatter. Still, the image burned in his mind. Armies. Planets. Power far beyond anything he had ever imagined. He lowered his gaze back to the armor. "If you are hunted, then why come here? This world is nothing. No one remembers it." Her eyes softened for the first time. "That is exactly why. No one looks for me in forgotten places." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to believe her words, yet the image of her leading armies refused to fade. She was no simple fugitive. She was something far greater, and far more dangerous. The silence stretched between them. Only the faint hum of the armor filled the air. At last she stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. "Will you continue?" she asked. Ethan met her eyes. His voice was quiet, but steady. "Yes." She studied him carefully, as if searching for fear in his expression. She found none. At last, she gave the smallest nod and returned to her seat. Ethan picked up his tools again, though his thoughts swirled like the storm outside. His hands worked on the armor, repairing, patching, connecting wires that pulsed like veins. Yet inside, his heart pounded. He had seen a fragment of the truth. He knew enough to understand that this woman was not just a survivor. She was a ruler. A leader of worlds. Someone who had stood at the center of history itself. And she had chosen to sit in his small workshop, trusting him, a mechanic with nothing but old tools and stubborn hands. The more he worked, the more he felt her gaze on him. Not hostile. Not cold. Curious. Searching. Almost as if she wondered why he had not turned her away after what he had seen. At last, Ethan spoke softly. "You carry the weight of many lives." She tilted her head. "And you carry none?" He gave a tired smile. "Only broken machines." Her eyes lingered on him, and for a moment, her expression shifted. Beneath the sharpness, there was something else. Something fragile. Perhaps loneliness. Ethan lowered his gaze again, continuing his work. The silence grew gentle now, no longer heavy with suspicion, but filled with something unspoken. The bond between them deepened, though neither dared to name it. As the light of day grew stronger, Ethan placed another repaired plate on the table. The armor pulsed with renewed strength, alive once more. He whispered to himself, too low for her to hear. "What have I gotten myself into?" Yet deep inside, he knew the truth. He was already part of something far greater than he had ever dreamed. And though he did not yet know it, this was only the beginning. The workshop had grown quiet. The storm was gone, leaving only soft winds brushing against the old metal walls. Morning light streamed through the cracks, painting the room in gold. The air no longer carried fear. It carried something far heavier, and far more fragile. Ethan sat with the stranger's armor before him, repairing another broken plate. His hands moved with focus, but his thoughts drifted to the vision he had seen. Fleets of war. Worlds in flames. Soldiers bowing before her. She was far greater than she pretended to be. Yet here she sat, silent, watching him work like a common wanderer. For a long while either spoke. Only the hum of the tools and the faint rhythm of the armor filled the air. At last, she broke the silence. "Why do you not ask?" Ethan looked up, confused. "Ask what?" "Who I am. What I command. Why I wear armor built for conquest." He set down his tool and wiped his hands on a cloth. His voice was calm. "Because if you wanted me to know, you would have told me already." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She seemed ready to argue, but then her expression softened. She leaned back in the chair, her armor pieces spread across the table between them like pieces of a broken crown. "You are different," she said quietly. Ethan gave a small, tired smile. "Different how?" "You treat me as a person. Not as a weapon. Not as a throne." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ethan felt something stir inside him, something that went beyond curiosity. He had spent years repairing broken machines, but he could sense that what sat before him was something far more broken. Not the armor. Not the metal. The woman herself. He leaned forward slightly. "Maybe you needed someone to do that." For the first time since she had entered his workshop, she smiled. It was faint, almost hidden, but it was real. A smile not of power, but of relief. Ethan's chest tightened. He turned quickly back to the armor, his hands working to hide the storm inside him. But her voice followed. "Why do you live here, in this forgotten place?" He paused, his jaw tense. He answered slowly, each word carrying the weight of memory. "Because no one came when we needed help. The empires fought their wars. The miners bled and starved. We were left behind. So I stayed. To fix what little we had left. Her gaze lingered on him. She did not speak, but he felt her silence like a hand resting on his shoulder. It was not pity. It was something else. Something closer to understanding. Ethan continued repairing, though his voice grew softer. People call it survival. I call it stubbornness. She tilted her head. And yet you helped me without question. He nodded. Because someone has to. Their eyes met again, and this time neither looked away. The air between them shifted, charged with something unspoken. The workshop felt smaller now, as if the walls leaned closer, holding them in this fragile moment. She finally broke the silence, her voice gentle. You are brave. Ethan shook his head. No. Just foolish. Foolishness is another name for courage, she replied softly. Her words struck deep. He looked down quickly, hiding the way his chest tightened again. He focused on the armor, though his hands trembled slightly. As the hours passed, the bond between them grew without words. She no longer watched him with suspicion. Instead, she watched with something close to trust. And Ethan, though still haunted by the vision of her commanding entire fleets, began to see not a ruler, but a woman. A woman carrying scars, weight, and loneliness that no crown could hide. When the final piece of the day's work was done, Ethan set his tools aside. His voice was quiet. You should rest. Tomorrow I can finish the rest. She hesitated, then nodded. She removed the repaired pieces from the table and placed them carefully beside her. Her movements were slow, almost tender, as though she valued his work more than she expected to. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhausted. For a while, they sat in silence, the soft glow of the repaired armor the only light in the room. At last, she spoke again. Thank you, Ethan. He froze. She had not asked his name before, and he had not spoken it. Yet she said it as if she had always known. He turned to her, startled. How do you? Her lips curved in that faint smile again. You forget. I have lived across 1,000 worlds. Names are never hidden for long. Ethan laughed quietly, though there was nervousness in his voice. Then you already know too much about me. And still, she whispered, I choose to stay. The words settled between them like fire in the cold. Ethan looked at her, and in that moment, the storms of power, war, and destiny faded away. There was only her. The woman in the broken armor. And him, the mechanic who dared to treat her as more than what she was. Either of them spoke again. They didn't need to. The bond was already there, silent but unshakable, growing stronger with every heartbeat. And in that quiet workshop, as night began to fall once more, something far greater than armor was being repaired. The night settled over the mining town once again. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the air heavy and still. Inside the workshop, the faint glow of the repaired armor lit the walls with soft blue light. The room felt different now. The silence between Ethan and the stranger was no longer sharp. It was alive, filled with something unspoken, something both of them felt but neither dared to name. Ethan worked on the final connections of the chest plate. The circuits pulsed brighter under his steady hands. He could feel the power returning, flowing through the armor like blood returning to a heart. When he finished, he stepped back. It should hold now, he said. Stronger than before. The woman stood. She lifted the chest plate, and as she placed it across her body, the armor sealed itself with a deep hum. The light spread across the plates, flowing like fire along hidden lines. She straightened, taller, stronger, her presence filling the room in a way Ethan had never seen before. For a moment, she was silent. Then she spoke. Her voice was no longer weary. It was sharp, commanding, and filled with authority. You have done more than I expected. Ethan nodded, though unease stirred in his chest. It was only repair. Nothing more. Her eyes met his. They were steady, unyielding, filled with power that could not be hidden now. You do not understand what you have touched, she said. Ethan frowned. Then tell me. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her gaze moved across the workshop, the broken walls, the simple tools, the quiet dust of a forgotten town. Then she returned her eyes to him. You saw fragments of the truth, she said. But now you deserve to hear it whole. Ethan's breath caught. His heart pounded, yet he stood firm. The glow of the armor brightened, filling the room with light. Her voice carried weight, each word falling like thunder. I am not a soldier. I am not a wanderer. I am the Empress of the Orion Galaxy, ruler of thousands of worlds, commander of fleets that stretch across the stars. The workshop seemed to shrink around her. The glow of the armor painted her like a figure of legend, no longer wounded, no longer hiding. Ethan saw in her the same figure from the vision. The woman who stood at the center of armies. The woman who bore the weight of empires. His mouth went dry. He struggled to speak, but the words still came. You rule them. All of them. Yes, she answered. And because of that, I am hunted. Enemies who wish to take the galaxy, enemies who wish to see me fall, enemies who will never stop. Ethan's legs felt weak. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the table. She was no stranger. She was no survivor who stumbled into his workshop by chance. She was destiny itself, standing in front of him, cloaked in power and war. Yet beneath the weight of her words, something else stirred inside him. He looked into her eyes, and past the light of the armor, past the image of an empress. He saw the same woman who had smiled faintly when he called her human. The same woman who had whispered thanks in the silence of the storm. Ethan's voice was quiet, but steady. Then why trust me? You could have ordered me, threatened me, or killed me if I refused. But you asked? Why? Her gaze softened, though the strength in her voice remained. Because you did not see an empress when I entered this place. You saw a wounded stranger. You touched my scars as if they mattered, not my crown. Few in the galaxy would dare to do that. The air grew heavy between them. Ethan felt the weight of her confession settle into his chest. He was no soldier, no ruler, no hero. Yet he had been the one she trusted. His throat tightened. So what happens now? The glow of the armor dimmed, settling into steady light. She stepped closer to him, her presence overwhelming, yet her voice was quiet. Now you must choose. You can forget me. Continue your life here, fixing broken tools, waiting for storms to pass. Or, she paused, her eyes holding his. You can walk with me into the stars. And nothing will ever be the same again. Ethan's chest rose and fell with each heavy breath. His mind screamed with questions, fears, and doubts. But his heart had already begun to answer. In that moment, as the glow of her armor lit the room and her words hung in the air, Ethan knew his life had already changed. He could never return to what he was before. The stranger was no longer just a mystery. She was the Empress of a galaxy. And she had placed her trust in him. The revelation was complete. And the true story was only beginning. The glow of the repaired armor lit the workshop like firelight. Every corner of the small room seemed alive with shadows, stretching and bending around the Empress as she stood tall, her presence commanding yet strangely vulnerable. Ethan could still hear her words echoing in his mind. You can walk with me into the stars. And nothing will ever be the same again. The silence that followed was heavy. Ethan's chest tightened as his thoughts clashed inside him. His life had always been simple, though painful. Fixing machines for miners who could barely pay. Living on scraps. Watching his world sink deeper into dust and despair. He had accepted it as his fate. But now, standing before him was a choice far greater than he had ever imagined. Stay, and continue the life he knew. Or step into her world, a world of war, power, and danger. He looked at her. She stood calm, yet her eyes betrayed something rare. A quiet fear. Not of her enemies. Not of death. But of his answer. Why me? Ethan asked, his voice low, almost breaking. You rule thousands of worlds. You have fleets, armies, power I cannot even imagine. Why would my choice matter to you? Her gaze did not leave him. Because power commands obedience. It does not command trust. You gave me what no army, no throne, no empire ever could. You saw me, not my crown. That is rarer than you believe. Her words struck deep, but Ethan turned away, pacing across the workshop. His hands shook as he pressed them against the old wooden table. The storm outside had ended, but inside him, another storm raged. If he stayed, he would be safe. He would live and die on this forgotten world, far from wars, far from fleets. But he would live small, unchanged, while the galaxy burned. If he went with her, he would leave behind everything he knew. He would step into a life where every day could be his last. He would stand beside a woman who carried the weight of empires, and his own soul would never be the same again. The choice tore at him. His mind screamed for safety, but his heart whispered another truth. He remembered the moment she first stepped into his workshop, broken and silent. He remembered her faint smile when he spoke of stubbornness. He remembered her voice when she said, "You treated me as a person." And now, as he looked at her again, he saw not just an empress. He saw the woman who had trusted him with her life. Slowly, Ethan stepped closer. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of his decision. "If I come with you, there is no return, is there?" Her eyes softened, though her voice remained steady. "No return. Once you walk into the stars, you cannot go back." Ethan's throat tightened. He thought of his home, his workshop, the broken machines that had defined his life. Then he thought of her. The Empress who had shown him a galaxy beyond his dreams, and yet had chosen to sit here, in this forgotten place, because she trusted him. He took a long breath. "Then I cannot stay." Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something breaking through her calm mask. Relief. Gratitude. Perhaps even joy. Ethan continued, his voice trembling but firm. "I will not let you fight alone. If you carry the weight of worlds, then I will carry what little I can beside you. Not because you are an empress. Not because of crowns or fleets. But because when you walked through my door, I knew you were more than all of that." For a moment, silence filled the workshop again. She stepped closer, the glow of her armor reflecting in her eyes. Her voice was softer now, almost tender. "Then you are no longer a mechanic of a forgotten world. You are something greater." Ethan gave a faint smile. "I am still only a mechanic. But maybe that is enough." The air between them grew heavy, alive with unspoken meaning. She reached out, not with command, not with power, but with quiet humanity. Her fingers brushed lightly against his hand. For a ruler of galaxies, the gesture was small. But to Ethan, it felt like the beginning of something vast, something infinite. The choice was made. He would walk with her into the stars. And together, they would face whatever waited beyond the storm. The night was quiet. The storm had long since passed, leaving the air clear and sharp beneath the stars. From the small windows of the workshop, Ethan could see them, endless points of light scattered across the dark sky. They had always looked distant to him, unreachable, like jewels locked away in a vault. But tonight they felt closer. The Empress stood at the doorway, her armor now whole and gleaming, restored by his hands. The soft glow traced along its edges, alive with energy, powerful enough to shake worlds. Yet her gaze was not on the stars or the horizon. It was on him. "You have chosen," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded with both fear and wonder. "Yes. I will go with you." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then her lips curved into a faint smile, rare and true. It was not the smile of an empress. It was the smile of a woman who had carried battles, crowns, and loneliness for far too long, and had finally found something unexpected. "You do not yet know what awaits you," she whispered. "Maybe not," Ethan replied. "But I know what waits if I stay. Dust. Silence. Nothing." His words carried no anger, only truth. She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded with quiet respect. "You are braver than many soldiers I have known." He gave a tired smile. I am not brave. I am stubborn. You already know that. Her laughter was soft, almost hidden, but it carried warmth that filled the room more than the glow of her armor. Together, they stepped outside. The night air wrapped around them, cool and clean. Above, the stars burned brighter than ever. Ethan followed her gaze and felt the weight of the choice he had made. He was leaving behind everything. His workshop, his world, his old life. But in return, he was stepping into something vast. Something greater than he had ever dreamed. In the distance, beyond the hills, a faint shimmer appeared in the sky. At first, it looked like a falling star, but as it drew closer, its shape became clear. A ship. Sleek, silent, and alive with the same strange light that pulsed in her armor. Ethan's breath caught. He had seen ships before, but never one like this. It moved like it belonged to the night itself, its presence both graceful and powerful. The Empress turned to him. This is where your life begins again. He swallowed hard, his heart pounding. And where it ends, maybe. Perhaps, she said softly. But if it ends, it will not end in silence. It will end in fire, in struggle, in meaning. And you will not face it alone. The words struck deep. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt his smallness fall away. He was no longer a forgotten mechanic on a forgotten world. He was something else now. A spark, carried into the galaxy by a woman who ruled it. The ship descended, its engines whispering like wind across the barren land. The ground trembled lightly beneath their feet. Ethan looked at her, and she looked back, her eyes steady, her hand resting against the repaired chest plate he had brought back to life. He whispered, almost to himself, "It started because I fixed your armor." She answered, her voice filled with something more than command. Something closer to tenderness. "No. It started because you saw me, when no one else did." The ship's ramp lowered, lights spilling out into the night. Ethan took a long breath. His heart pounded with fear and excitement, but he did not hesitate. He stepped forward beside her. Together, they walked toward the waiting ship. At the edge of the ramp, he stopped for one last glance at the town. His workshop stood silent in the distance, nothing more than wood, rust, and old tools. It had been his whole world once. Now, it was only a memory. He turned back to her. She was already looking at him, her eyes softer now, as if she understood what he was leaving behind. "Ready?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "Yes." They stepped onto the ship, side by side. The ramp closed, and the engines roared to life. The ground fell away beneath them, and the mining town disappeared into the shadows of the world. The ship rose higher, breaking through the thin clouds, until the stars filled every corner of the sky. Ethan stood beside her, his chest rising with wonder. For the first time in his life, he did not feel small beneath the stars. He felt infinite. The Empress placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. Her voice was steady, filled with quiet promise. "Together, we will change the galaxy." Ethan met her eyes. He did not know how. He did not know when. But in his heart he believed her. Because sometimes, the fate of empires begins not with armies, not with crowns, but with something simple. A human mechanic. A broken armor. And the spark of trust between two souls. As the ship carried them into the endless night, the stars no longer looked distant. They looked like home.